Hi there, I'm Wendy McCallum, burnout and alcohol coach and wellness expert, and you're listening to Bite-Size Balance, where everyday extraordinary women share their stories, expertise, and wisdom, all in the name of lifting each other up and creating a better life by design. Whether it's wellness, career, relationships, food, alcohol, mindfulness, hormones, or parenting, we talk about all things women's balance. If your life looks great on paper, but it still feels like something's missing, you're in the right place. Welcome to Bite-Size Balance.
Hi, everyone. It's Wendy. I'm back today with one of my good friends and fellow certified This Naked Mind coach, Emily, Lynn Paulson. Hi, Emily.
Hi, Wendy. Thanks for having me.
I'm really glad to have you back today. We have a topic to talk about today that I think is really timely. So I'm excited to explore it with you. You and I have kind of talked about this behind the scenes many times. So I think that's going to be a good conversation. We're going to talk about why women are over drinking right now. So why drinking has just become such a problem for so many women. And we're going to talk all about this social circumstances that have made that problem so prevalent, but also the science behind it and what's actually going on with alcohol. And I don't think I've ever talked about this as a focused topic on this podcast before. So I'm excited to talk to you about it because you and I both come from the same school in terms of literally, we actually literally come from the same school.
Come from the same school.
But we also come from the same school of thought around this in that we have really some similar approaches to the whole idea of how to figure out whether you have a problem with alcohol and when it's okay to make a change, which we're going to talk about. And spoiler alert, it's pretty much whenever you feel like it. There are no rules to that. So can you just do me a favor? Because we're doing this kind of last minute. Emily and I just decided to record this podcast. It's actually a Saturday afternoon when I rarely record podcasts. I just told Emily I just put my bra on. So just for her. Can you tell everybody a little bit about you and where you are and what you do?
Yes. So I, like you said, I'm a certified This Naked Mind coach, and I found recovery coaching through my own recovery. I actually started writing. I got sober 5 years ago, and I had a very rock bottom story. So that's why I like talking to you about this, because we have very similar schools of thoughts, but different stories, different ways how we kind of came into this alcohol-free life. I had a long period of time where I was questioning my alcohol use. And I can look back now and say, those are the kind of people I want to talk to. Those are the women I want to talk to. You don't have to wait till some proverbial rock bottom moment to get sober. So I found recovery through my own writing. I did certifications for recovery coaching, started working with women. And now I have a group called the Sober Mom Squad to help women who have found their drinking has increased during motherhood, are looking for different ways to cope, and just to find a group of women who really feel the same way and want their kids to have a mom where, the focus is not always on alcohol. So that's me.
Yeah. And so we have talked a lot about the overlap between the groups of women that we serve and work with and support around alcohol. And there's big overlap. A lot of the women that I work with are moms, obviously, but your real focus is on moms, and you have a lot of younger moms, I think, as well in your programming. But generally we're both working with women, and we're working with women who are busy and overwhelmed and for whom alcohol has become a crutch or a coping mechanism or a tool for escape.
Yep. Yeah. And it's no wonder, right?
Right.
That's the first thing I always say when people are like, talk about mommy wine culture, talk about why women drink. And I always want to make clear, this is not a judgmental place, because it's somewhere that I have been. And it's no wonder the world's not offering us very many other solutions, right? You've got to take care of, got to work, you got to, carry the load at home. If you have kids, you've got to carry the mental energy of everybody and everything. And we're not given a lot of help. And so when an alcohol company says, here's mommy's timeout wine, it's no wonder why that's something that you reach for, right? So that's always the first thing I like to put out there is we get it. You get it, I get it. Right?
Oh yeah. Oh, we totally get it. So everything we're going to talk about today, there's absolutely zero judgment in any of it, because you and I have both been there. And I think one of the things that you and I are both really passionate about is actually talking about this stuff out loud, which is why we're doing this podcast. And we're big fans of community and connection, which is why you have a community of women that you support that actually functions as a community, and why I do group coaching for exactly the same reason. So we're all about talking about this stuff. The only way to alleviate the guilt and shame that goes along with drinking for women is to get really clear on the fact that, first of all, this isn't your fault. And second of all, you're not alone. Mm-hmm. So we really want to emphasize that right out of the gate here. But what we wanted to talk about is why women's drinking has escalated in the way that it has in the last 10 years, but especially I think in the last couple of years. So I don't have any of my statistics with me. What do you know? What statistics can you quote off the top of your head in terms of women's drinking in the last 10 years, Emily? Got any?
Gosh, do I have any out the top of my head? I feel like there's so many statistics and they're all bad that it almost doesn't even matter. I know there's a 41% increase in alcoholic liver disease in young women, which is almost all you need to know, right? That's all you need to know, is that this is a disease that in the past was something that took out older men. You get to a certain age and you're going to get something, right? But for young women to have alcoholic liver disease, that means you're drinking to such an extent that your body cannot process it. You cannot keep up. I mean, it's just, that's really just an in-your-face statistic, in my opinion. And also that women are now drinking as much or more than men.
Yeah. It's like, I basically over the last 18 months during the course of this pandemic, I have seen a new statistic every month. So we know that liver disease is up with young women. I actually have a podcast episode coming up that's already recorded with an amazing woman who is a stage 4 liver disease survivor. She's living with it right now. And her story is remarkable. And she is what I would consider to be quite young. She was quite young. She was younger than I am now when she was diagnosed with stage 4 liver disease. So that statistic is mind blowing, but then I'm seeing it also in the work I'm doing around burnout. Like this report came out around alcohol in the legal profession in the States, which was just, again, mind blowing. We know that Canadians are drinking more. So I think the last statistic I saw was that 25% of Canadians are drinking significantly more than they were before the pandemic. We also know that women's binge drinking is up by 41%, like some, again, crazy number. And binge drinking is 4 drinks within how many hours? 2 hours?
I think it's actually less than that, Wendy. I think it's 2.5 units over the course of 2 hours or something like that.
Okay.
Of course, maybe we should have had our stats here.
Yeah, we're like, here we are like, don't listen to us. We're just going to give you generalizations. We actually do know what we're talking about, but we're recording this on a Saturday afternoon and we did not get our stats out for this. But I think there actually are probably different ways, but to define it, I've heard it defined as 4 drinks or more within a short window of time, which, for me was a regular Friday night.
Yep.
So we know that binge drinking is up during this pandemic and, burnout rates are on the rise and women are just completely overwhelmed. So we want to first say, like, we understand if you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking like, oh God, and you're having a bit of a sinking feeling right now. We get it. Like
you're talking directly to me. Yeah,
exactly. And there's so much happening right now that has contributed to this. So we obviously have just the normal overwhelm. Like Emily and I recorded a podcast. I guess it was during the pandemic, but it was right at the beginning of the pandemic. Cause I think you were like my second or third guest on my first season of Bite Size Balance. And when we were talking, we did none of these stats had come out yet, or I don't believe, around just the incredible increases in drinking as a result of the pandemic. And now we're like at least another year into it. It was actually probably about a year ago that we recorded that episode. We're about another year into it and it's really been relentless and it hasn't eased in the way that I think you and I probably thought it was going to ease when we recorded that podcast a year ago.
And I think too, the other thing that compounds it is that there's all this confirmation bias and the mixed messaging that through the pandemic, there was this increase in marketing. Yeah. And every industry took a hit, right? So the alcohol industry is going to come in and, try and take advantage of where it can, and so like the marketing of single serve drinks, alcohol delivery, when you go to the checkout at, your drugstore, I don't know how it is in Canada, but here, there's cans of wine at the checkout. It changes your idea. So even if you see these stats, okay, this is bad. Women are dying, and also I'm drinking more. I can see that, but yet also over here, there's all this stuff that's saying it's okay, and everyone's doing this too.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the statistics are saying everyone's doing this too. Like even the statistics are, reinforcing that in a weird way, I think. And so, I guess the thing that I just wanted to emphasize is that most North Americans drink. The overwhelming majority of adult North Americans drink, and most of them have questioned their drinking. So they're not all drinking happily with no concerns about the way they're drinking. So if you're concerned that your drinking has escalated during the course of this pandemic, or maybe even over a longer period of time, you're not alone in that. It's actually kind of the majority position with alcohol. It's just, we're not talking about it. And so again, we want to normalize the conversation around changing your relationship with alcohol and actually making the positive, proactive choice to drink less or to stop drinking, no matter where you are on the spectrum of alcohol use, because it's a huge spectrum, as you said. I mean, your story is a dramatic story. And for anybody who's listening, who's curious about Emily's story, her memoir, Highlight Reel Recovery, is amazing. And she tells her whole story there. And it's really different from my story. So we really have very different stories, but we are very similar in terms of where we ended up. So we want to normalize this conversation because both of us, I think, believe really strongly that it does not matter where you are on that spectrum. It does not matter what you call yourself. So I don't know, Emily, do you identify with the term alcoholic?
You know what? I honestly am in the school of thought where I don't care what you call me, like whatever's comfortable for you, it's fine. I don't personally call myself an alcoholic anymore. Not because I think that's a bad thing to say or whatever, but I really identify more with the substance use disorder scale, the clinical definition of it. And for me, I know it's out there. I know it's still a possibility for me, but I have absolutely no desire to drink. And when I think of the term alcoholic, I think of those really early stages where I really was white-knuckling it. And I think that's what I love about, the program we offer and how we talk about is how getting to a place where you don't want it anymore. Yeah. And it's honestly, it comes down to informed consent. And when you're talking about whether, should you drink, should you not drink, it's not even really about whether you are a sober person, or you completely cut alcohol out of your life, that understanding that alcohol is a dangerous substance that has risk associated with it, I think would do everybody in the world a favor. Just that knowledge, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. We just need to take our blinders off and call this what it is, which is, it's a drug. And we conveniently separate it into its own category. We talk about drugs and alcohol as though it's not a drug. It is a drug. In fact, it's the most dangerous drug out there. It harms and kills more people than any other drug in the world. So if you're, of the view that this is harmless, it is so not harmless as a drug. It may not be costing you anything, and that's fine. But it is costing lots of people an awful lot. And so it's worth talking about, like any other substance that has addictive properties. We have to recognize that there's a spectrum, and that it can become really, really dangerous. And we're just not talking about it. So I think that's the other thing we want to do, is just call it what it is. We want to talk about the science of alcohol today. And if you're if you're listening to this podcast, you're like, I don't want to hear it, and you're covering your ears, that is a huge sign that you need to listen to this podcast, because I was in that space for a very long time where I was like, show me all the studies that tell me alcohol is great for me. Show me every article you can that tells me that these glasses of red wine I'm having every night are actually doing wonders for my youthful, dewy skin and my, strong heart. I wanted to see all of that stuff, and I did not want to see the other stuff, which leads to that confirmation bias thing that happens. And it's interesting because it happens. Am I using the right term? What's the term for that when you see what you want to see?
Confirmation bias. Yeah.
Okay, good. I got it right.
Yeah.
Okay, good. It's Saturday, but I still have some of my wits about me, apparently. Yeah. So, we have that confirmation bias where we see the things we want to see. So when we have decided that something is a certain way, then we will notice the things that actually validate and support that. And that is the way it was for me for a very long time. The interesting thing is that the internet and social media allow for a whole other level of confirmation bias, because when I click on a post that says a glass of red wine is as good as 30 minutes of exercise a day, the internet remembers that. And then it does its own confirmation bias on that, and that it starts sending me more and more of those articles. So I think that also has been happening to probably a lot of women. And as you said, in the course of the pandemic, there's been all this new stuff out there around alcohol as a really helpful tool for coping with a pandemic.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point, because you can't really escape it. And even in this world, like I live in a very alcohol-free world online. I hide alcohol ads. I don't subscribe to things that deliver me alcohol content, because I'm not a person who drinks it or buys it. Mm-hmm. And I still see it. And so I can only imagine the feed of someone where that's the content they're delivering and that's the content they keep being served. It's just going to feed that. Right. And it also feeds the things that even the things that they don't really go together. And I don't know if in fact, I know you had the same feeling too about, health, nutrition, and we kind of ignore the alcohol part.
Yeah.
Like having the 5K walk for breast cancer, but yet it's sponsored by an alcohol company, and alcohol causes breast cancer. And it's like, we know. And I always thought, wow, it's weird that I'm drinking a beer at the end of this half marathon, but we don't really do anything about it. We don't reconcile it. We're like, this is just the way it is. It's separate.
Yeah. And even more so, imagine being me. I'm like a wellness expert, for the last 10, 11 years, I've been out there publicly talking about healthy living, eating, stress management, burnout prevention, all of these things, and for a huge piece of that, up until the last 4 years, I was drinking, and I was drinking far more than was healthy. Not that any level of alcohol is healthy. We're going to talk about that in a second, but I was definitely not drinking in a way that represented wellness. And I did not have a lot of internal dissonance about that for many, many years. And it wasn't until the end couple of years that it really started to bother me, because I think I just got to a point where I was like sick of my own bullshit, for lack of a better word, and recognizing that this confirmation, like I'm a smart person, and I recognized that this confirmation bias stuff was happening, and that I was looking for what I wanted to see and seeing what I wanted to see. But certainly for me at the time that I stopped drinking, which was almost 4 years ago now, it was starting to become pretty clear that alcohol was not good for you. There were new studies coming out, and the risk factors were changing, and it was just really hard to continue to believe what I wanted to believe around that. So one thing I wanted to make sure we talk about is the fact that this creeps up on you. This does not happen overnight for most women. This is something that evolves and grows over time. And I know it did for you. Your drinking story started when you were young, and same thing with me, really. Mine was probably a bit more of a slow burn than yours was, but by the end, it was not fun at all. And I just want to mention that and make sure that we're emphasizing that, because I think, again, the default kind of assumption is that this needs to be like a majorly big deal before we start thinking about making any change around it. And we really want to say to you, like, get off early. If you can get off this thing early, get off this thing early. And if I'm going to ask you this question, because I already know what your answer is going to be, but how do you know if you have a problem with alcohol, Emily?
This is a very complicated answer, I think, but if it's not serving you in any way, it's not helpful, but you don't have to have a problem with it.
Right. Exactly.
And if you even ask yourself, do I have a problem? At the very least, there's something to explore there. Yeah. And so I think we have these categories of like, do I have a problem or don't I? It's black or it's white. Yeah. And that's not how it works. Nobody is born. And of course there's some genetic components to it and environmental, and there's definitely things there, if you grew up in an alcoholic home and all of that, but you're dealing with an addictive substance with alcohol. And we don't use that terminology with any other addictive substance. We don't say like, hey, are you a regular smoker? Are you an addictive smoker?
Yeah.
Are you a regular meth user? Or are you an addictive meth user? And I know that sounds like out there, but we recognize that those things are just addictive and they're hard to quit. And with alcohol, it's the exact same thing. So it's not whether, do you have a problem? It's, is this a problem for you yet? Are you drinking in a quantity yet that's created problems for you? I think that's the bigger question.
Yeah. And I think the huge problem is that we are not recognizing out loud that alcohol is an addictive substance, no matter what. You don't have to have the special genetic predisposition to get addicted to alcohol. Alcohol is addictive, and anyone who uses it for long enough and in large enough quantities is going to get addicted to it.
It's an addictive substance in humans. And it's the only drug that we joke about. Yeah. And I'm sure we'll get into this, but it's the only one that we make kitschy jokes and t-shirts and mugs about. Yeah. That we don't have like there may be cigarettes in here, there may be cocaine in here, but wine, it's just like a free for all. Yeah. And it dumbs down. And again, it's that confirmation bias. Like, this must be a joke. This must not be a big deal. All this messaging, it impacts us more than we think.
Well, yeah. I mean, how many years did I spend? I don't know if this was the case for you, but I spent many, many years assuming I didn't have a problem because everyone who surrounded me seemed to be doing very similar things to what I was doing. They weren't. I realize now they weren't, but it sure looked like that. And I was definitely getting that messaging. And I had that mug, by the way.
Yeah. This may be wine. Yeah.
Yeah. I still have it. I think I still have it somewhere. And now I just laugh because it's, of course, there's always coffee in there, but I think that definitely held me back and kept me stuck for a long time. This idea that I had to somehow have an objective problem. So there was somehow, so you answered that exactly the way I was hoping you'd answer it. And that's how I look at it as well. It has nothing to do with any objective criteria in my mind. The only thing that matters is whether you are happy with your relationship with alcohol, how it's making you feel. And if you're at a point where you're starting to question it, like Emily said, that's probably something to listen to and not try to stuff down. And so keep listening to this podcast because we have lots to say about that. And
I think the other thing with the problematic aspect of it is there's always somewhere lower. Yeah. And that's where I really got to, because my excuse always was, well, this hasn't happened yet. Well, this hasn't happened yet. Well, I haven't gotten a DUI yet. Well, I've never had any consequences. Well, my health is fine. Until all of those things started happening. And so there's always somewhere lower to go. So if you're in that place where you're like, I don't love my relationship with it, but nobody's ever said anything and this hasn't happened. It's like, you do not have to have those things happen. Yeah. And you also don't have to say, I need to quit either to start asking yourself some of these questions.
Right. And we should also pause, because we haven't said this yet, to say it's actually way better when you don't drink. Like, life is actually tremendous without alcohol. Like we should say that, because, I think that's the other piece that's missing from this conversation is a celebration of just living life without alcohol in it, because it's been pretty amazing for me. That doesn't mean it wasn't hard. It was very hard in the beginning because I was addicted to it. And also because it's all around us and we live in this alcohol-centric society. So we have to learn how to do things without alcohol. But once you get your legs under you and you chip away and dissolve all of those beliefs that you have that are false around why you need alcohol in your life, it's really pretty spectacular. So we don't want to be sounding doomsday about this. This is actually not only is it a positive choice for your health and wellness and all of that stuff, it's actually just a really great way to live. And we are all about celebrating that. So I guess to summarize, the reasons why women are over drinking, we've got the increased stress that's going on as a result of the pandemic. Women are already overwhelmed and doing the lion's share of the work. This is just the way it is. Statistically, we are doing most of us are doing more of the domestic work and responsibilities and caregiving and all the rest of it. And then on top of that, many of us are working. So we've got that going as well. And now we have the additional stress of the pandemic. And then on top of that, we have what we're calling the third shift, which is the fun that it is to try to get kids schooled at home while you're trying to work and deal with all the other stuff. So I think that has just led to just an incredible amount of stress on women over the last couple of years. But then we also have the addictive nature of alcohol. Let's talk about that for a second. Let's just talk about the science of that for a second. Do you want to have a crack at it, or do you want me to do it?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure we both have a lot to add, but the fact that, again, like we've talked about this, that it's seen as this benign substance. And I think the addition of the marketplace of all like the hard seltzers and all of that stuff, where the day drinking, it really has affected how we feel about the substance. But all that to say, alcohol is an addictive substance. It's addictive in the human body. And over time, any human is going to get addicted to it. And just constantly driving that message home is important to know. Yeah.
One thing that really stuck with me in the early days when I was learning about alcohol, which is something that you and I both believe is a big piece of the process of getting free from alcohol and making it small and irrelevant in your life, is really learning everything you can about it, which again feels really painful and uncomfortable, especially when you're still drinking. But it gives you it just gives you information that you can't unlearn what you know. And for me, it was uncomfortable while I was still trying to stop drinking, but it was a real motivator for me, and now continues to be a real driver for me in terms of all the work I do. But one of the things that really stuck with me was when I started to understand the dopamine cycle with alcohol, and how when you drink alcohol, your brain responds by pumping out dopamine, which is the reward or wanting hormone. So that's the hormone that tells our brain that we should try to get more of that thing. And the interesting thing about dopamine is that dopamine's really there from an evolutionary perspective to signal to our brain to get the things that we need to survive. So it's typically associated with activities or behaviors that are necessary for our survival and for the survival of our species. So for example, we get a dopamine rush when we have sex because we need to procreate in order to stay on the planet. We get a dopamine rush around carbohydrates because we need to eat in order to stay alive. But there are things that artificially stimulate dopamine, and alcohol is one of them. And so what's happening when we have a drink is that our brain is literally getting the message that we need this thing to survive. And that message is getting repeated every time we have another drink. And so it's got that neural pathway is getting strengthened in our brain, and our brain starts looking for the substance that it needs to survive. And when you put it in those terms, it's like, no freaking wonder. No wonder that we get hooked on this thing. No wonder we're over drinking. We're getting a signal from our brain, like, you got to get more of this stuff if you want to stay alive.
Well, and what really stuck with me was that it's not even the poisoning of the alcohol itself. Everyone knows alcohol is a poisonous substance. You can get alcohol poisoning, all of that, but your brain actually makes chemicals. Your brain makes a chemical to counteract it. Acetaldehyde is what it makes to counteract alcohol. That is actually more poisonous, more toxic, more carcinogenic than any substance you could put in your own body. And that to me was like, so basically if I drink, my body's going to poison me even more. And that's scary.
It's crazy. And because acetaldehyde is so toxic, and alcohol also obviously is toxic and poisonous, because of that, your body is going to triage and direct all of its efforts and energy at getting alcohol and acetaldehyde out first. And it's going to do that to the detriment of every other system in your body. So this is another thing that I didn't really understand, but your body, for example, is not doing any real work to try to regulate your blood sugar when you're drinking, because it's like, look, we'll take care of that later. What really matters right now is that Wendy doesn't die as a result of these toxic, the alcohol poison. And then on top of that, the toxic chemical that her body has created to try to get the poison out. So I find all of this stuff super fascinating. I also think it's really interesting that our brain knows that alcohol is not supposed to be there. So it immediately recognizes when it's being depressed by alcohol, which is a chemical depressant, of course. So when our brain slows down, it recognizes that that's not normal, and it immediately goes into this active stage of trying to balance that back out. And the way that it does that is by pumping out stress hormones. That blew my mind too, because one of the main reasons why I drank, and I think why most women drink and overdrink, is because they really believe that it helps them to relax. Mm-hmm. And that was certainly the way I felt. I really believed that to be true.
Mm-hmm. And sleep too. And when you stop, when you're like, okay, maybe this is affecting my sleep, maybe this is affecting my anxiety, and you stop for a couple of days, your sleep's going to be worse. Your anxiety is going to be worse because your brain has now been making the chemicals to counteract that. Mm-hmm. And your anxiety is going to be naturally high. And we don't normally allow ourselves to let our brains catch up. And this is true with, antidepressants, medications that, you may go to the doctor and be like, I have anxiety. And they're like, here's some Zoloft. Well, it doesn't work when you use alcohol. Like you said, your body will prioritize getting alcohol out of your system before it does anything else, before it makes this, drug work correctly with the serotonin in your brain, before you break down carbohydrates, before you do anything. Kill free radicals before your immune system, kicks in. And so it leads indirectly to so many other problems.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's really fascinating to me. And there's so much science that is just so helpful to understand. If you are trying to change your relationship with alcohol, it can be so powerful. And that's all of the stuff that we have tried to put into this new program that you and I have created, which we also wanted to talk about today, but which we almost forgot about because we got so into our conversation about over drinking. But Emily and I have been talking about this for a while. We both do, as we said, we both do similar things and have a very similar approach and philosophy. And we're both trained through the Naked Mind as certified coaches. And we wanted to create a program that was really accessible, shorter term than some of the other programming that we offer, and really an entry point, I think, for women who are starting to really question their drinking and know that something needs to change, but are unsure of how to do that, or for women who have been trying to make change for a long time, but have not been able to do that effectively. So if you've been playing the moderation game, which I played for about 5 years, very badly, I was very bad at the moderation game. Not for lack of effort, but if you've been playing that moderation game and you've been trying to cut back on how much you're drinking and making rules for yourself, and then finding yourself breaking them, or taking like a break from alcohol and then coming back afterwards, and within a couple of months, you're drinking as much or more than you were before, then this program that we've created called Rewind is the perfect place for you to try different, because this program is really, really different certainly from all the ways that I ever tried to cut back, quit, moderate, whatever. So you want to just tell people a little bit about what makes this program different?
Yeah. So instead of coming at it as okay, here's a month, you're going to take a month off alcohol and you're going to feel great, and then you'll go back to normal. And it's great. Any break you take from alcohol is amazing. I'm all about harm reduction. Any decrease in alcohol is awesome. But how this is different is it actually changes your thoughts and beliefs about alcohol. And it actually challenges what you may not even realize you believe about alcohol. Again, if you think it makes you sleep better, if you think it makes you more fun, if you think it makes you a better mom, whatever it is, whatever those beliefs are, we really break that down. So you can say, okay, maybe this is where it's true. Maybe this is where it's not. Yeah. And when you change those subconscious beliefs, it does change your behavior. So eventually you go to the play date and you say, actually, that doesn't even sound good. That doesn't even seem good because I have to drive home later. Right. It changes those pathways in your brain. And I like to say too, that this isn't something you need to say, okay, I have to sign up for this and this is going to be it for me. Right. I'm going to be sober forever. This is a way to examine your beliefs. And this is something you can do over and over. If you sign up, you can do this 6 weeks. You can go back and rewatch things that maybe you still are having trouble around. It's not anything that's a cut and dry. This is the absolute way you have to do it, because everybody's beliefs and thoughts are different around alcohol, and your relationship with alcohol is different. The reasons you drink are different. And so this is a very personalized way to make this work for you, to examine your own personal thoughts and beliefs around it.
Yeah, that was a good summary. Thank you. I think, the things that are really different about the approach that you and I use in coaching around alcohol is that we really focus in on curiosity, as you just said. So really this learning, like just getting into this kind of no strings, no judgment, no consequences place mentally, which is really important. If we're in a 30-day program, let's say, and it's like the goal is to just not drink for 30 days, then there's only one way to succeed, and that is to not drink for 30 days straight. And you and I both know that that's not how it goes a lot of the time, and that this is challenging, and that life gets lifey, and sometimes things don't go the way that we want them to go. And we want to set everybody up for success with this. We want you to come into this knowing there's no way to fail, because there really is no way to fail this Rewind program. It is really all about getting curious and learning as much as you can. And maybe you learn how hard it is in certain circumstances to not drink. And maybe in some of those circumstances, you actually end up drinking, but you're going to learn from that too. And we're going to take that information and we're going to use it to help you set yourself up for better success the next time you find yourself in those circumstances. And that leads me to the second, I think, key thing that sets this program apart, which is that we are also going to be emphasizing the fact that we need to get into self-compassion and self-grace here and get out of the blame and shame cycle that we are so often in around alcohol, because it is so counterproductive. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to, first of all, get super clear on the fact that alcohol is an addictive substance, and this is a substance problem, not a user problem. And hopefully this podcast and what we've talked about, just the few things we've touched on here, will open up that possibility for you in your brain. And you might, after this podcast, be thinking to yourself, oh, wait a second, maybe this isn't my fault. Maybe I'm not weak. Maybe I'm not a failure, because you're not. So we want to really lean into that. And we also want to be trying our best to celebrate everything that happens in the course of the program. So everything that you experience in relation to drinking, but also to being alcohol free. So we want to celebrate all of the bits of what life is like alcohol free. And I think it's a whole lot easier to do that when you're not feeling like you're under the gun and you're hanging on by your fingernails. Mm-hmm. So, we are really excited about this program because it is accessible. It's really for anybody, any woman who is starting to question her relationship with alcohol. If you've just been having moments of self-doubt, or if you have been, like I was, Googling in the middle of the night, am I an alcoholic? Anywhere in that spectrum, this program is really designed for you. And what we're doing is incorporating a lot of information in really small bite-sized bits. So it's not overwhelming. It's only going to take about 10 minutes a day to do this program. And we're doing that because that's the part that's going to help reprogram your brain and give you what we're calling kind of a circuit breaker, really disrupt your patterns and your beliefs around alcohol, so that at the end of this program, you have a really good shot of resetting and creating a plan for yourself that's actually going to serve you going forward, so that you don't return to your old patterns and habits around alcohol. And then we're also incorporating some group coaching, which we're going to be doing together, which I'm super excited about because I've never coached with you. So it's going to be fun.
That'll be great. That'll be great.
I'm excited. So the information on that program, it's now available for registration. It's open, and the information for that program you can find on my website at wendymccallum.com. You can find it in the show notes of this podcast. And Emily will also have the info on her website. What's your website, Emily?
It'll be on sobermomsquad.com.
Perfect. Sobermomsquad.com. Just as a closing note, if you have been struggling with this and you have been spending some time thinking about how much you're drinking, I just, again, want to reiterate, you are not alone in this. I've been there. Emily's been there, and literally millions of women are there right now. So you're not alone, and there is hope. It does not need to be this way. And we hope that you might consider joining us in the Rewind program. It's a really great, as I said, accessible entry into the experiment around your relationship with alcohol. So that's it for us. Thanks, Emily.
Thanks, Wendy.
You've been listening to Bite Size Balance with your host, Wendy McCallum. As a certified Naked Mind coach, I help busy women like you find freedom from alcohol. If you're starting to question your relationship with alcohol, you'll want to listen to my free 3-part video series where I address the top 3 myths around why you think you need to drink. Sign up now at www.wendymccallum.com/myths. That's www.wendymccallum.com/myths.